Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on October 22nd, 2022, and is current through the Star Trek Lower Decks episode Trusted Sources, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is returning guest and co-host of the Promenade Merchants podcast. It's Heather Kirby. Heather, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited to talk some news stories with you today.
Oh, yes. Well, Heather, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Well, there's so many choices right now.
Sure are.
There really is. But if I had to pick what was on the top of my list that has me excited, well, for anyone who listening, I live in Columbus, Ohio, and GalaxyCon Columbus is in the beginning of December, which has a whole bunch of Star Trek guests.
Oh my goodness. Tell me more. Who's coming?
Jonathan Frakes, Brett Spiner, John Delancey, Gates McFadden, and Terry Farrell will all be there at GalaxyCon Columbus. So I am super excited for that. It's my first chance to get to meet some of the TNG cast because I was at Mission Chicago and there wasn't a whole lot of TNG people there. And I love TNG. And, some of my favorite Trekkie friends are also coming out to Columbus for the weekend. So I get to show off my city to my friends and just be a huge Trekkie and meet a whole bunch of Star Trek people. And it's going to be awesome. So yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
And it's right down the street from you, so you don't even have to get a hotel.
Exactly.
That is not bad. Which of the guests you mentioned do you think you're most excited to meet?
Probably Gates, because Beverly Crusher was my first huge favorite character in Star Trek, and then Jonathan Frakes after that, because he's just a legend. Everyone loves Jonathan Frakes. How can you not love Jonathan Frakes? I'm super excited to meet him.
Yeah, he's great, and he's very, very nice, and surprisingly good at remembering the people who come by the table. So
really,
yeah, I've met him a couple of times. The most recent time I sort of met him was he came to AwesomeCon here in the DC area. I guess this probably would have been 2019, maybe.
Yeah.
And yes, this would have been 2019 because Star Trek Picard was filming and he had been announced as being in Picard. So everybody knew that him and Brent Spiner and Marina Sirtis were coming back. And I typically I'll only go to AwesomeCon if they have Star Trek people there. And they had a decent number there that year. They had him and Brent and Marina and Michael Dorn. And so I was all right, I'll go to AwesomeCon. So, because I like to show up and support the Star Trek actors when they're there, get a picture or autograph, that kind of thing. So I did my picture with Frakes, and then I went by his table and it was not super busy. So we had the opportunity to chat for a little bit. And, I wasn't they're going to put you back in a Starfleet uniform, right? Asking for spoilers. But I did make some joke about how, no. This must have been 2018 because he had not yet been announced as being in the show, or it was 2019 and it was before Comic-Con, because I remember saying that he had been announced as being a director, but not as being in the show. And so I remember joking with him something like, it'd be a mighty shame if they had you, 10 feet away from Patrick Stewart and didn't just happen to turn the camera around directly on you and film a couple of scenes, right? You're going all the way out there, you'll be on site. What's it going to take to slap a uniform on you and have you make an appearance? And, and he was very gracious about it and we laughed and joked and all of that. And, he asked me my name and I told him my name. And then probably about 2-3 hours later, I had a photo op with Brent Spiner.
Yeah.
And I, walked into the little photo op area and Brent's there and, I say hi and snap my picture. And as I'm about to leave, I hear somebody say, Alex. And I'm like, surely that's not me, right? Like, I'm in this photo op room. Brent didn't say that to me, and nor did I tell him my name. Nobody in this room theoretically knows my name.
Yeah.
That they must be talking to somebody who works here. And then I heard Alex again, and I looked over, and it's Frakes, and he's sitting because he's waiting then to do the like Brent Spiner, Jonathan Frakes duo photo op coming right afterwards.
Yeah.
And he remembered me from earlier. He probably had seen 100 people in the 3 hours in between when I saw him, and just happened to be walking through that photo art room. And so it was just this really nice moment, right? Where like, he didn't have to remember me. He didn't have to remember my name. He certainly didn't have to say anything in that particular moment, right? Like, it's not like I noticed that he was there or was seeking his approval or recognition. He offered it to me freely, and it was just a really nice moment. And honestly, that is probably like one of the nicest convention experiences I've ever had, just because of course I'm a huge fanboy, right? It's nice to be noticed, and it's nice to be remembered, if even for 3 hours, right? And I'm sure at that point I exited his brain and hold no sway on it forevermore, but like, just that one moment was just really nice. And so, yeah, I'm a huge Jonathan Frakes stan as a result.
Oh, definitely. Like so another convention story, but not relating to Jonathan Frakes. Like, the very first person I met when I went to Mission Chicago was Anthony Rapp.
Yeah.
And I walked up to him, and I was like the second or third person in his line. And I was so nervous, but like, he started a conversation with every single person in line, just asking them about where they were from, having some sort of way to relate to people, which I thought was really nice. And then later on that day, I had a photo op with him, and I walked in for the photo op, and he's like, hello again. He remembered me. And it was just that little act of him remembering me from being in line, like, just felt so nice, you know? It just makes you feel, little things like that make you feel special. So I get it.
Yeah, it was such a great experience. And that sounds like a great experience too with Anthony. And yeah, it's like, I don't know, the photo ops and the autographs are great and everything, but honestly, like, those are the experiences that you're hoping for, right? Just that sort of, that moment of connection, that moment of recognition. And so to tie all this up in a bow, I hope you have plenty of moments of connection and recognition in early December at GalaxyCon Columbus.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, let me tell you what I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week, which is I got a shipping notification yesterday for the second of two, what are basically badgie plushies that have been produced by a company called Killer Robot. And they've done two badgies, and I have one of them already. There was what they made two available to buy, and one was ready for shipping last month, and then one now, the last one has shipped today. And they're very cool. They're about 13 inches tall, so there's pretty sizable badgies. Sort of plushy arms and legs, and then the delta has sort of that, kind of pleathery consistency to it. But there's two expressions you can buy. There's Happy Badgie, which is the one that I already have sitting, staring at me, grimacing somewhat. It has a big smile on its face, but I know it wants to kill me. And then the other one that was the one that was just released is Evil Badgie. So I will have both of them here to torment me and torture me. Actually, maybe this is a terrible mistake, but but they're very, very cool. And Lower Decks merch is great. There's not a ton of it, right? You've got the Tom Paris plate that Star Trek Unlimited has done. You've got the Geordie Bear. Somebody made a Keishon puppet, which was on Etsy that a bunch of people that one's non-licensed. And now we've got Badgie, and so I'm really pleased about that. And it's a fun little thing, and it's just fun, cool merch. So yes, I'm looking forward to getting that into my house.
Awesome.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Well, later this week, Star Trek Prodigy returns for Season 1B, and the first of the last 10 episodes of the show's first season. To celebrate Prodigy's return, a number of new interviews have been posted from the last couple of weeks with Prodigy cast and crew about what to expect from the next 10 adventures with the Protostar and its crew. In a New York Comic-Con interview with Brett Gray, who voices Dal on the series, Gray talked about where we find the character in the back half of Season 1. The stakes are the highest they've ever been, but at the same time, he still doesn't even know where he comes from or what his purpose is. So there's lots for him to think about and lots for him to learn, Gray said. Self-discovery has been something that he's been struggling with since the beginning of the series, and he's come so far. I'm very proud of him, even though he's a fictional character. He's come a very long way, and he's learned a lot about other people and how to connect to them. Now it's about trying to learn how to connect to himself. Gray also talked about the collaborative process between himself and the show's producers to bring Dal to life. He said, quote, "In terms of the character, though, they let us create a lot. I mean, the Hagemans have been super open to collaboration, and if there are lines where I feel like, oh, what if I tried it like this, they let me give them 10 different options to fit the scene best. We take lots of time to really make sure the moments are landing, and it's really awesome to be led by them and guided by them and Brooke Chalmers, our voice director, because it's my first time acting only with sound. So experimenting with the nuances and the intentionality around sound is something new that I'm learning about." And as to whether Gray would be willing to appear as Dal in live-action Star Trek, as Lower Deck stars Tawny Newsome and Jack Quaid are doing in Strange New Worlds Season 2, Gray said, quote, "Oh my god, paint me purple. Let's go. Hand me the prosthetics. I'm ready. I think that'd be so fun. I can only imagine when I'm already getting so emotionally attached to Dal and to the show, watching it in animation, sitting on a protostar with Ella next to me. What would that do to me? It would be a dream." Heather, are you excited to see more of Dal's journey in the back half of Star Trek Prodigy Season 1?
I am really excited to see the second half of Star Trek Prodigy. I loved the first 10 episodes. They just have a wonderful, fresh, and exciting feel to them. And I can't wait to learn more about these characters. And Dal is yeah, he's definitely going on a journey of self-discovery, and it's going to be a very fun and interesting ride. And I think all of them are. All the characters on Prodigy are in some way. They're going on their own journey of discovering who they are and what's important to them. And that's what makes like a children's show really shine and stand out. But that's also that's a very Star Trek feeling as well. And that's why it fits with this show.
Yeah, I'm thrilled for the return of Star Trek Prodigy. And I really like the way, we've already seen in the first 10 episodes of the show, right? Like for each of the characters, a defined character arc, an amount of defined character growth that I'm looking forward to that continuing through the next 10 episodes in the back half of season 1. I mean, I think there are lots of people who kind of, you sort of can't necessarily fault them for this because this is the kind of point of the arc, found Dal not the best character in the world in the first 10 episodes, right? Like that's intentional. Yeah. He is supposed to be brash and cocky and a bit of an ass and, bumbling into things and thinking he's knows what to do in every situation and having it be revealed that actually, he doesn't, or thinking he can do everything by himself and having it, sort of be shown to him that like, no, you need friends and you need companions in order to do this, and that's what the characters provide. And so I felt that I think it's pretty clear that by the end of A Moral Star Part 2 he has sort of learned some of those hard lessons, and it'll be curious to see where the character arc goes beyond that in terms of what's coming up for Dal in the next 10 episodes. But I'm really excited. And I think, it is sort of like so he's supposed to be the captain character, right? Or he will be the captain character. Mm-hmm. And it is that kind of fine line between, there's not a lot that pushes a lot of the traits of all of the Star Trek captains from being the heroic traits they are into being, sort of diamond in the rough, undefined. And I think we're kind of seeing that growth for the character and that arc where by the end of the series he kind of will be more in that sort of heroic vein where right now he is sort of learning the pieces of that. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of Brett Gray's performance as Dal, and I'm really excited for where things go for the character in the back half of season 1.
Definitely.
Well, in addition to Brett Gray, Prodigy co-showrunners Kevin and Dan Hageman, alongside co-executive producer and director Ben Ibon, were also on the interview circuit at New York Comic Con a couple of weeks ago. Kevin and Dan Hageman talked a little more about the decision to introduce Okona this season. Dan said, quote, "I think we had a laugh about the episode Outrageous Okona in the writer's room, and we loved that he was just this like 2-bit Han Solo, and we just thought, can we? And then we found out that we could get him, and we were like, let's do it." Billy Campbell was great too. I remember the first artist renditions that we did of him were more tasteful, and he said, no, you should really let him go. Give him an eye patch. And then that rippled down to when he was on Lower Decks. We were like, he's got to have the eye patch on him. We've got to keep this canon. Kevin Hageman added that, quote, "When we were recording Billy, he loved bringing the character back because he looked back and said, I didn't do a very good job about his appearance on Star Trek The Next Generation. And I think the script was going through changes. And so he said, I love what what you guys could do to give him a second chance. Kevin Hageman also teased some fun surprises for longtime Star Trek fans in the next 10 episodes, saying, quote, "We've got some fun surprise characters coming out in the back 10 episodes of season 1 and in season 2 especially. So we've been talking very closely with other shows to make sure it all works." Dan Hageman added that there are 2 new legacy characters in addition to Chakotay in season 1, one of which is presumably the recently announced Admiral Jellicoe. And about the decision in Prodigy to hew to the original Klingon design rather than the reimagined look for Discovery, Ben Ibone said, quote, "I think the way we've been looking at the Prodigy style is to really embrace what was there rather than completely reinventing just to stylize to fit within the visual reality. Because these designs are great, they are really fulsome, and they have been created a certain way for a certain reason, and they are very recognizable to the fans, and they mean something. And for us to just start shaking that, that's not the intention of Prodigy." The trio also discussed Prodigy merchandise, with Dan Hageman revealing that they've contributed notes to a design for a Protostar ship toy, presumably on the way from Playmates Toys, and their hope for more action figures to supplement the Prodigy crew action figures that have already been announced. Heather, what kind of Prodigy merchandise do you think you would like to see?
Murph plushies!
Murph plushies! Non-New York Comic Con exclusive Murph plushies, please.
Yes, I think that's the one everyone has been screaming for. More Murph plushies, come on. But yeah, I thought that article was really interesting because they talked about adding legacy characters into the show. And one of the things I really appreciate about Prodigy is how they're weaving these new characters and the story that they're telling, which is to ultimately introduce younger viewers to the Star Trek universe. Yep. And so they're doing an excellent job of weaving these legacy characters into the story. So you get bits and pieces of the larger Star Trek universe to hopefully like ignite your imagination and then go watch more. So I think like that's the goal they set out to do. And I think they're doing a really good job at it. And I can't wait to see who else they bring in.
Yes. So I indicated in last week's episode that I have seen a couple of the episodes of season 1B already. So obviously I'm not going to spoil anything about the episodes. But one thing I will say, which is not a spoiler because the producers have already said it, and I'm just coming in to say that it was not marketing speak, it's actually true, is that one of the things that's really clear to me over the next few episodes is, so over the first 10 episodes of Prodigy's first season, there was this arc of when you begin with Lost and Found in the first episode, there are Star Trek touches, there's obviously a Starfleet ship, but lots of people watched that episode and said it feels either generic-y sci-fi-y or it feels a bit Star Wars-y. Intentionally so, in my opinion, that it was designed that way because it's not designed to be like full-on Star Trek right from the front. And then when you track it over the next 10 episodes from sort of adding the Star Trek concepts along the way, explaining what the technology is, explaining what the Federation is in the third episode, introducing you to some legacy characters in Kobayashi, and then kind of manifesting fully in episode 10 with the arrival of actual Vice Admiral Janeway and the USS Dauntless, and, the kind of Chakotay pieces that get threaded in the latter half of the first half of the season. Oh boy, I wish this was season 2 so we didn't have to keep calling it the first half of season 1 and the second half of season 1. Anyway, like that arc, like where you get to the end of episode 10 in terms of Star Trekkiness, like that's not the kind of full all the way around that particular arc. There's a lot more to go in terms of how much Star Trekkiness can be in these episodes.
Oh yeah.
And they said this, right? They sort of talked about this intentional journey of introducing young people to the Star Trek universe and introducing them to the concepts and kind of bringing them along to it. And then, sort of dialing up the Star Trekkiness of Prodigy as it goes along. And the Star Trekkiness in episodes 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 is dialed way, way up from even 7, 8, 9, and 10, which is great. I mean, I think in terms of anybody who watched the first few episodes of that show and said, doesn't feel very Star Trek to me, I'm not going to keep watching it because I'm an adult and this is not, ultimately for me. I would say bring yourself right back. Start with Kobayashi, run yourself through A Moral Star Part 1 and 2, and then just watch Thursday's episode. And if Thursday's episode isn't enough for you to say, yeah, this is really Star Trek to me, and I'm on board, and now I can see that this was not Star Trek washing a generic sci-fi show. This was a very intentional strategy to build in the Star Trek elements into the show, then the show's just never going to be for you, and that's fine. But I'm convinced that if there are people out there who felt that way about the early section of Prodigy, watch Thursday's episode and you're not going to feel that way anymore. And you will be kind of sucked in and brought in as a Star Trek fan along for the journey. And it's really impressive the way they've done it, actually, once you kind of watch it through. And I'm really excited for everybody to see it. And I loved the next 5. I mean, I've seen 5 episodes of Prodigy's second half of the first season, and I loved every one of them. I thought they were all great. And there's just some really cool stuff and some really Star Trek-y stuff. And we know what some of those things are, right? They're in the trailer. Yeah. We get to see the Borg. The Borg are coming. Star Trek Prodigy's back half season 1. Admiral Jellicoe is coming to the back half of season 1 of Star Trek Prodigy. Admiral Janeway, the Dauntless, right? All this kind of stuff that gets threaded in. New characters, old races, different kinds of races we've not seen before, new races. It's like it just all really works. And so I'm really excited for the return of Prodigy. And it's one of, I think, the most triumphant success stories of the current phase of Star Trek.
I'm looking forward to watching.
What would you say? So are there any particular character arcs or stories that you're most interested in seeing continuing?
Probably Gwen.
Yep.
She was the one that, at least in the first 10 episodes, I really connected with. And I like to describe it as a character I wish I saw on screen when I was a teenager, because it's something like thinking back to how I felt at that time. Like it was a character that I can really relate to. So I'm looking forward to seeing her art play out more.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to more of that too. And I'm really excited to see more of Kate Mulgrew playing both hologram Janeway, but also Admiral Janeway too. I mean, for us, hell, if they're legacy Star Trek actors, then I guess we're legacy Star Trek fans. For us legacy Star Trek fans, it's just so great to see more, not just Janeway the character as in an interpretation of Janeway the character, as much as we love hologram Janeway, but to also see actual Janeway, the continuation of Admiral Janeway's story from the Captain Janeway who went to the Delta Quadrant and now commands the USS Dauntless as part of this mission that she's on to rescue the Protostar and retrieve it for the Federation and find out what happened to Chakotay. So it's a lot of fun to see.
Yes. Definitely.
Well, switching gears from Star Trek Prodigy to Star Trek Picard, the co-stars of Star Trek The Next Generation, who are also the co-stars of Star Trek Picard Season 3, do not seem ready to hang up their Starfleet uniforms at the conclusion of Season 3. Several of the TNG stars have dropped hints in the last couple of weeks that they are interested and that there might have been discussions about not ending their stories at the end of Picard. Marina Sirtis, who plays Counselor Troy, tweeted in response to a fan question about more Troy post-Picard that, quote, "You as the audience have the power to make that happen. We legacy actors, as they now call us, because old codgers is just rude, would love to continue, but only your voices can make it happen." Marina's tweet prompted Beverly Crusher actress Gates McFadden to chime in and also say, "I'm in if the fans are in." And when Jonathan Frakes tweeted the Picard trailer after New York Comic Con, which has the logline, "The final voyage begins," he added a cryptic, maybe not final, ... to really get fans' minds racing. Combine this with Terry Metalis' quick response to a fan question on stage at New York Comic Con, confirming that there is a passing of the torch moment in Picard Season 3, and Metalis having mentioned that there have been discussions about another 25th century show set after Picard, and it all serves to make you wonder. Heather, would you like to see more adventures for the TNG crew beyond the end of Star Trek Picard?
Okay, so here's the thing. I love the TNG crew, and I'm very excited to see season 3 of Star Trek Picard, but I want to see a spin-off of Picard. And so I want a show to come from that to ultimately grow the universe and keep moving it forward. However, I don't think it should completely focus around, as we're calling them, the legacy cast. In my opinion, the best way to help like the Star Trek universe grow and move forward is to take these characters that we know and love so much and use them to help build new characters and expand the universe, because they're not going to be around forever. And so we can't keep making shows with these characters, unfortunately, as they get older and might not necessarily want to do it anymore, but we need to help grow the universe. So I get what they're all saying, and they want to come back and they want to keep making stories, but I don't want to see I don't necessarily want to see another TNG movie, because honestly, TNG had 4 movies. TOS had 6. There's plenty of other directions we could go there. And as much as I'm excited about season 3, I don't want to see another show featuring all of the TNG cast together. Like, if we're going to have a spinoff from Picard, it needs to take some characters and then maybe bring back some of the newer characters that got put aside for season 3 and just help move forward and not necessarily stay in the past. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think, from my perspective, obviously, I'd love to see more of the TNG cast and the TNG actors, but it does feel a little bit like, to the extent that this is something that is or is not completed by the end of Star Trek Picard season 3, that those characters' best function right now is to sort of transition into, sort of whatever comes next, new ideas, new things, new parts of the universe, new characters, entirely new characters. And I sort of get this sense that maybe that's where everybody's kind of thinking anyway. I mean, the decision to feature in the Picard season 3 trailer and then to call out on stage at New York Comic Con that Geordie's daughters are included in Picard season 3 and have a role. And obviously LeVar Burton's actual daughter is playing one of Geordie LaForge's actual daughters. To me, that kind of points in that direction. And I sort of wonder a little bit if, I don't know that this is the kind of direction that Terry Matalas himself is kind of moving in, but I wonder if one of the kind of appropriate spaces within which to do something like have the legacy actors kind of, build that bridge to the next generation, pun intended, would be through something like a Starfleet Academy show, right? Where you could have the older actors sort of serving as the mentors to a younger group of actors who are sort of learning and had that from the teen perspective. I mean, that is somewhat similar in a way to Prodigy with Hologram Janeway and that crew, but that's for a child audience as opposed to a teen and older audience, which, hey, they're different experiences, right? We've all been through it. We know what it's like to grow up as a child, and we know what it's like to grow up as a teenager. And those are 2 different experiences that play themselves out differently for many people. So yeah, I sort of get the sense that my guess would be that Picard season 3 ends up being sort of the biggest injection of new Troy, Crusher, Riker, Worf content that we're going to get, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that there's not a space for more from those characters and those actors in the appropriate space with the appropriate, kind of justification within a future Star Trek show, and kind of see what ultimately happens.
Yeah, definitely.
If one Star Trek TNG cast member was to show up on one additional Star Trek show, whether existing or new, who would you pick?
That's a hard question. I'm gonna go out of left field here, and say Worf.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's just very random, and Worf is nowhere near my favorite character on TNG, but I think we need a little bit more Klingons. I mean, we had the Klingons in Discovery, but yeah, we need a bit more Klingons in our life. And I think Worf would be a good one to help bring them into different shows.
Awesome. I love that answer. Well, and lastly this week, Paramount Plus is launching in more European countries this year. Following the launch in the United Kingdom and Italy this summer, Paramount Plus will be coming to France on December 1st, followed by Germany, Switzerland, and Austria on December the 8th. At launch, the service is expected to have available all of Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and Star Trek Prodigy, and be the exclusive home of new Star Trek moving forward, with with the exception of Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Lower Decks, which will remain on Amazon Prime Video for the foreseeable future. Star Trek fans in the rest of Europe will, by early 2023, be able to access Paramount Plus's Star Trek content through a new partnership between Paramount and Comcast called Sky Showtime. Sky Showtime is already live in the Nordic countries and will be coming to countries like Spain, Portugal, and Eastern and Central Europe early next year. Heather, obviously we're both in the US, so we've not, neither of us have been through the trials and tribulations of Paramount Plus's international launch, but we've certainly been key observers of it over the last few months. Are you pleased to see Paramount Plus and Paramount Plus's exclusive Star Trek content finally reach their new homes in Europe?
I am very pleased. I felt for our European and fans outside of the US because the Paramount Plus globally launch, this whole thing has turned into a disaster for them. So yeah, I understand what Paramount was trying to do, to want to have all their shows on the same platform and launch it across the globe in order to make more money. I get that, but it's been a slow process for fans outside of the US. And I really do feel for them. It's not fair to them to have to deal with this. So I'm glad that it is coming to more countries soon and more people get to watch Star Trek.
Yeah, I am certainly pleased that I think this is maybe one of the last stories I'm going to have to do on international distribution for Star Trek, which is delightful because all of these stories have largely been about how badly Paramount has bungled its international distribution strategy in all kinds of different ways. And now at least it feels like for a lot of the world, right, I think there's still large parts of Asia that don't yet have access to a lot of the Star Trek content. I think I was reading that Star Trek Strange New Worlds is now on, I think it's called Paramount Asia or something like that channel, that this has been sort of frustrating and now it's kind of coming to a close. That the issue had been that Paramount was relying upon non-Paramount owned corporations to distribute their content in Netflix for Star Trek Discovery and Amazon Prime Video for Lower Decks and for Picard, and that was not a sustainable model for them. And you can sort of provide your definition for sustainable however you want to, but that, there was a very strong desire for them to at least bring that programming in-house in some way, shape or form, whether that was Paramount Plus or whether that was through things like Sky Showtime or something else. And that now those sort of distribution channels are set up. And as a result of being set up, that we will now see this sort of relatively seamlessly happen, that everybody knows where for their country they can get their exclusive Paramount Plus Star Trek content, whether that's on Paramount Plus itself or whether that's on some other Paramount owned service that has all of the Paramount Plus stuff on it, right? Like a Sky Showtime, that just means that's the end of it, right? And as long as you know for your country where you've got to go in order to get it, you're all good. And I think the other dimension to that too is, and this will be true at least as long as Lower Decks and Picard stays on Amazon Prime Video, though I doubt they will both be there forever, certainly through the end of their first run broadcast. I would imagine then there'll be a certain amount of time and then they'll revert back to Paramount Plus. But that hey, a new Star Trek show gets announced next year, right, to replace Picard, and everybody just knows that's going to be on Paramount Plus, right? There's not going to be this question of, is it going to be on Netflix? Is it going to be on Amazon? It's nope, where's your other Paramount Plus Star Trek content? That's where the next one's going to be, and the one after that, and the one after that, and the one after that. And there was this wobble after New York Comic Con where the official Star Trek Twitter account tweeted the Discovery Season 5 trailer, and then they just copied and pasted the Season 4 reply tweets that are here are all the kind of places internationally you can get access to Star Trek. And it said for the UK that it was going to be on Pluto, which was true for Season 4 because Paramount Plus had not launched in the UK. And then everyone was oh, but does that mean that it's not going to be on Paramount Plus for Season 5 and that it is going to be on Pluto, which in fairness to them is what the tweet said. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case. It is going to be on Paramount Plus. And I think, yes, I think lots of international fans have a lot of PTSD about the Netflix situation and Star Trek Discovery Season 4.
Oh,
but
definitely.
I think now that there is a system, a structure, there is a Paramount-owned content distribution channel for Star Trek, that is the one that's going to be from now on for new Star Trek, and it's going to work the same way from here on out that it does today. And so I'm very pleased about that because it means we can just focus on what I like to talk about, which is the shows themselves and not the sort of messy Paramount corporate bull stuff that comes alongside it.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, my guest and I give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Heather, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Okay, well, mine is a wish. And I was thinking about how the one thing I love about Lower Decks merchandise is the weekly t-shirts every week, in which they do a new t-shirt for every episode.
How many have you bought for season 3?
I've only bought 2 so far.
Okay, which 2 did you get?
The Tendi one.
Yep.
And the one right after that was Shax and Tiana from the holiday.
Very cool. I was just wearing the Tendi one yesterday.
I'm thinking about buying the Starbase 81 from this week.
Yeah, that one's fine. I got that one too. I will confess, this season I have got the 9 they have done. I have bought 7 of them.
Yeah. So my wish is that they would do this for other shows, because I am a sucker for nerdy t-shirts, okay? And I think if they got some sort of partnership with another clothing company to do it for, like, say, Discovery, definitely for Discovery, I would buy all of them. I'm not gonna lie. I would spend so much money. They could take my money. It would be amazing. I love the concept that they're doing this for Lower Decks. Like, I always buy a bunch every year because they're so much fun and they're unique. They're not just like generic characters or something.
Yes.
It's something unique to the episode. And so, yeah, I kind of wish they would figure out a way to do it for some of the other shows as well. That's my wish.
I love that wish. I love the Lower Decks t-shirts. I've not done the t-shirt subscription any of the 3 years they've done it, because I'm like, do I want to commit to doing 10? And for season 1, I bought 5, and for season 2, I bought 5. But now I bought 7, and we'll see next week. If the t-shirt's any good next week, that'll bring me up to 8 for the season. The only 2 I didn't get, but that I would happily have owned. There were none that I was like, I just don't want that. Was I did not get the Shax and Ta'ana shirt, and I also did not get the Peanut Hamper shirt. Those are the only 2 that I haven't bought from this season. But I love about them what you said, right? That they are interesting, different, good art, and that they're not just generic characters on a black t-shirt, right? It's not just, here's your Rutherford t-shirt, which is a black t-shirt with a character like, the sort of standard whatever the licensee style book character art is for Rutherford. Boom, slap that on a shirt and sell it. It's great art, it's unique art, and sometimes that means it's like just not for you, right? Like you might look at it and be like, I don't actually really like that, so I'm not going to buy it. But that's cool in a way, because it might not appeal to you, but that doesn't mean there's not lots of other people that it does appeal to. And hey, we've now got 30 of these things, 33 if you got the subscription and got then the exclusive 11th t-shirt that goes along with the subscription. So it's possible for people to like just enjoy this. And actually, I've just noticed I'm wearing one of the Lower Decks t-shirts right now. I'm wearing the Phoenix one from Grounded, the first episode of this season. So I've been wearing these a lot lately. And they're great t-shirts. They're very high quality. So yeah, I'd love to see more of them for the other shows. I mean, especially like a Prodigy one would be cool, because in sort of in the vein of animation and, having great artists working on the show. Yeah, the Prodigy artists seem pretty great at what they do. Let's get them doing some t-shirts as well.
Yes, definitely.
All right, let me tell you my theory, which is a Star Trek Prodigy theory, because I'm keeping it on theme for this week's episode for the return of Star Trek Prodigy later this week. And that is, who else from Star Trek Voyager of the main cast do I think will appear in Star Trek Prodigy? And honestly, I think eventually all of them will, if Prodigy runs long enough. I think all of the Voyager main cast will appear in at least 1 or 2 episodes of the show. I just if the show runs long enough. But if you ask me to pick only one character who I thought was most likely to ultimately appear in Prodigy, whether that's later on in season 1, whether that's season 2, whether that's if they get picked up for season 3, who knows? But who would that be? My answer would be Tuvok. And I picked Tuvok for a very specific reason, not just because I'm like, Tuvok's a great character and I love Tim Russ, and I do think Tuvok's a really great character and I do love Tim Russ, and it was not a Tim Russ Tuvok, but we did get Tuvok in the Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3 premiere this year. But I think Tuvok is most likely to appear in Prodigy because I think the character's dynamics with now Admiral Janeway most closely tracks the character dynamics for Prodigy as a whole. This is a show about mentors and mentees. This is a show about learning from each other. It's a show about people who are different finding commonality and common cause with each other and coming to rely on each other. And if that did not just describe the Janeway Tuvok relationship to you, then I question what show you watched for 7 years other than Star Trek Voyager, because to me that very much is the Janeway Tuvok relationship, right? It's mentor mentee, it's very close friends. He's a lot older than she is, has sort of wisdom from a different kind of lifestyle, different background to share with her. Even though she's his superior, she was always very deferential to him throughout the show, except when it came to sort of matters of like making decisions around command. And like you can see in that relationship, some of the like some shades of the relationship, sort of the sort of dynamics of the Prodigy crew with like hologram Janeway. But honestly, you can see shades of that between characters like Dal and Gwyn, right? Who are developing this very close friendship, this close relationship in which they rely on each other and have very different kind of life experiences and, sort of like do good things as a result of blending together those sort of different backgrounds into something better. And so, yeah, my theory is if any other Star Trek Voyager character shows up in Prodigy, it's going to be Tuvok, because I think the Tuvok Janeway relationship is very similar to a lot of the relationships that are on Prodigy. Heather, what do you think about that theory?
I think that's I mean, you hit it spot on. They do have a very similar mentor-mentee relationship, and I could see that happening, just as like almost as someone that like Janeway, a friend Janeway can rely on to talk to about what's going on. Like Tuvok would definitely be that person. I could see it. Now, if I had to pick one,
yes, who would you pick?
I would pick B'Elanna.
Okay, but
it's honestly for the same reasoning you listed, except for she has very much a mentor-mentee relationship with Chakotay. So like, and I could see her showing up at some point just because her fierceness would want to come help and figure out what's going on with Chakotay.
And I think, like B'Elanna's character arc is kind of similar to some of the Prodigy characters, right? Like, track it back to the beginning of the episode, we're talking about Dal and how, he's a bit of a hothead in the early part of the first season and clearly is sort of coming into his own and learning to be more mature and rely on others for help. Again, if that doesn't sound like the story arc for B'Elanna Torres throughout Star Trek Voyager, I challenge you, what show were you watching for 7 seasons? So what a perfectly analogous kind of character arc from a legacy character from the previous show that this one spins out of, in order to kind of, and like that would be a cool experience, would be having the Prodigy crew meet a character like B'Elanna Torres to see, I used to be like you and now I'm like this, and these are the kind of things you can do with your life, and this is the kind of thing you can strive for. So yeah, I love that. All right, maybe you're right. Maybe it should be B'Elanna and not Tuvok. You've talked me around, Heather. Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Heather Kirby, for joining me today. Heather, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
Easiest way to find me is on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @nerdygal33. You can also check out my podcast, the Promenade Merchants Podcast. The Twitter handle is @PromTrekPod.
And you can find this show on Twitter @WeeklyTrek and me @Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Heather. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.